Hello everybody and welcome back for another episode of Fundy Fridays. If you're new around these parts, my wife, the Reverend Jen, and I have been married for about a month now. We've received a ton of well wishes and nice things from you all, and we cannot tell you all how much that means to us, so thank you so much if you reached out to congratulate us on our recent wedding. And sadly, while we weren't able to have all our Jennanites in person there to celebrate with us, I did manage to save one wedding tradition that I can share with you all here today. I will now amuse you all with the time-honored recitation of the traditional Borat joke. Are you ready? My wife!
Wow, is very nice.
That was fun. It's like the chicken dance for the class of 2007. You have to do it even if nobody knows exactly why you have to do it. Now, if the Reverend were here speaking to you right now, she would probably say that we talk about American conservative politics, fundamentalist Christianity, and quote-unquote gay stuff on this channel. And while today's episode isn't necessarily about gay stuff per se, we are going to be discussing the dangerous rise of anti-transgender legislation in the United States right now.
Hello, this is the Reverend, and I would just like to say, as a little disclaimer of my own, that the topic of transgender laws and discrimination is not simply a, quote, gay issue, and I don't want to conflate these two. It is something that affects the broader queer community, though, but I do want it to be officially on the record that gender identity has nothing to do with sexual orientation, and besides that, trans rights are human rights, and God bless. I'll see y'all soon.
Right now, we are seeing a massive and coordinated attack on the transgender community of the United States. I know that this episode is probably going to be a particularly tough one for some of the Jennanites in our flock, and perhaps especially for some of the trans folks in our flock. I am going to try and have a little fun with this, like I always do, because one, I think it helps keep us all sane, and two, I think it's a great way to help us all learn the things that we need to learn when they get uncomfortable. But I want you all to rest assured, no trans person will be the butt of any jokes today. Only bigots, bureaucrats, and other assorted bad folk. You can call me Rio, you can call me Ken, it doesn't matter. All that matters is today, I'm gonna be punching up. Jokes aside though, if you do find this particular subject to be too intense or too triggering, I would encourage you to go ahead and step away from this video now, and I want you to know that I fully support you in doing that. Laughter can only take us so far, and this whole concept is just very serious and dark by nature. But if you do manage to stick around with me today, I think I'll be able to leave you by the end of this video with some useful, valuable information about what's going on, and maybe some practical ways on how you yourself can engage with the topic. And yes, I understand that this modern wave of transphobia has been in motion for several years in the United States now, and if we want to be real honest, the transgender community has never been treated well by the United States in its entire history. The sharp acceleration in anti-trans legislation in the period from 2020 to 2022, and the subsequent explosion of anti-trans legislation all across this nation in 2023, it's indicative of something much more sinister and concerning from just the zealots and GOP hardliners that we're used to dealing with when it comes to these kinds of issues. A lot of folks have reached out to me to cover this, and I noticed that a lot of them seem to talk about feeling really bad even when they couldn't necessarily keep track of all of the specifics. Well, for anyone who feels like that, I want you to hear me when I say that you are not crazy. This is not normal, and your rage and fear are well justified. And the convoluted nature of this whole situation isn't by accident either. Taking place at the state level rather than the federal level has generally made it much harder to keep up with this particular legislative blitz than it may be for ones with a more national focus. This statewide strategy has a lot of benefits for the transphobes who are perpetrating it right now, and one of those is how easily the strategy can confuse, exhaust, and demoralize detractors who want to oppose this attempt at trans genocide. The large number of complex bills and public statements, all concentrated into a short time frame and into one single legislative session period, it's all part of an active attempt by conservative strategists to push trans rights supporters out of the way. This isn't a bug in the plan, it's a feature. And one way we can help neutralize that strategy is by staying informed and keeping track of new issues and bills as they unfold in real time. And for the record, I am not here today to try and meet the conservatives where they're at or any of that nonsense. Their arguments are ridiculous, their concerns are baseless, and their desires are preposterous. I want to be clear about my motivations for this episode right off the bat, and in order to do that, I'm going to borrow a quote from one of my favorite modern poets, Mona Leo, to tell you that for this next line, you gotta look me in my eyes. Trans people of all ages deserve nothing less than full acceptance, appreciation, and equality under the law. And anything less than that is simply unacceptable and must not be tolerated. Full stop. I don't feel the need to demonstrate that trans folks aren't bathroom predators or cheating athletes or confused adolescents or any of that nonsense, because those ideas are such obvious drivel that a proper response would simply give them more platform than they deserve. Trans people are being targeted not because they are bad, but because they are convenient. I'm here to arm trans rights supporters with some of the knowledge and hope they may need to counteract all this bullshit. Once again, we see social conservatives gleefully toying with the rights of marginalized populations, and I know I'm not the only one who's sick of it. And I know I'm not the only one here who's well sick of hearing the lives and struggles of an entire marginalized population be boiled down to pronoun jokes told by bad comedians and worse politicians.
So for those of you that don't know me, my name is J.R. Majewski, and my pronouns are patriot and ass kicker.
They, them, it, what. I'm a conspiracy theorist. My pronouns are told you so. So.
My pronouns are kiss my.
I hope you can see this because I'm doing it as hard as I can.
And yet now, things have progressed far beyond bad jokes told by uninspired dullards. Instead now, the American right seems more than happy to acknowledge their goal of full trans eradication. They aren't just saying the quiet part out loud anymore. They're screaming it, and they're being met with raucous applause in return.
There can be no middle way in dealing with transgenderism. It is all or nothing. Then for the good of society, and especially for the good of the poor people who have fallen prey to this confusion, transgenderism must be eradicated from public life entirely. The whole preposterous ideology at every level.
So make no mistake, contesting this stuff is something we all need to be ready for. The American anti-trans brigade, without a shred of dignity or truth to stand upon, continue to advance their agenda with vicious hate-mongering and willful ignorance. The stakes are far too high for us to just rest on our laurels. Even the passage of just one of these bills is a tragedy that often puts thousands of transgender individuals and trans kids in direct jeopardy, and we simply cannot stand for that. Furthermore, another part of this strategy is an active attempt by conservative activists, who I feel the need to remind everyone have been hating and targeting the LGBTQIA+ community for years, to split the community and drive a wedge between the T and the rest of the letters.
For all its recent success, the LGBT alliance is fragile. Trans activists need the gay rights movement to help legitimize them. Gender identity on its own is a bridge too far. Separate the T from the alphabet soup.
Well, I don't know about all of you, but nothing turns me into a cantankerous jerk more than being told by my enemies who my friends are. Trans people are my friends.
Trans people are my friends. Transphobes can't catch these hands.
I'm not going to let some bigoted Karen tell me otherwise, and I encourage all of you to look at this issue the same way. So yeah, no, we're going to keep the T right here next to us. Thank you very much. Now that the longest disclaimer in Fundy Friday's history probably is complete, it's time, I think, to move into the whats, whys, and hows of this whole situation. To begin, I do want to highlight that a great amount of the information you're going to hear today comes from just two places. Number one, the website translegislation.com, and number two, the ACLU, or more specifically, their interactive map of all anti-trans statewide legislation being moved through various legislatures right now. In fact, in all honesty, I would argue that what I'm doing here today is in great part just signal boosting the work that they've already done. If you're looking to learn more about any of the topics I discuss here today, those are the two sources that I would encourage you to look at first, and I will leave them linked at the very top of the description. So for the purposes of today, we're going to be focusing on three categories of anti-trans legislation, as they are outlined on translegislation.com, and these categories are as follows. Access bills, which are legislation that dictates what kind of facilities and activities a trans person will have access to, hence the name Access Bill. This category most notably includes legislation that denies trans folks access to restrooms and sports teams that align with their gender identity. Healthcare bills, legislation that dictates what kind of healthcare trans folks can receive, at what age they can receive it, which parts of it their insurance must cover, whether it can affirm their gender identity, and other critical concerns like that. And then 3, miscellaneous bills, which is admittedly a catch-all category. Everything from bills dictating what teachers can tell their students about gender identity to what trans folks can put on their birth certificates falls into this category. However, there is one type of bill that will fall into this category which has become very notable and prominent since the beginning of 2023, but we'll cover that shortly. Moving on, let's take a look at this chart from translegislation.com now that we have our categories in place. I'll tell you all right now that this chart is going to come back a lot and is really the centerpiece of almost everything we're talking about here today. So taking a look, we can see that at least as early as 2015, state-level anti-trans legislation wasn't nearly the epidemic we're seeing today. 2015 only saw 19 total anti-trans pieces of legislation being advanced through all U.S. state-level governments. And most of these were of the bathroom bill variety, unfairly targeting transgender rights to use public restrooms that align with their gender identity. I do think it should be noted here just how little it seems that conservatives cared about these issues while Trump had control of the White House. Take note of the immediate surge of bathroom and miscellaneous bills immediately following Trump's 2016 victory here, which is likely based on the additional surge of GOP legislators into state-level positions around the same time. Then take note of how this was followed by 3 years of rapidly decreasing interest from 2017 to 2019. While I know this is a serious issue and I want to avoid being reductive, I do think the data shows that this is, among other things, a giant conservative temper tantrum trying to recoup imaginary losses in the culture war by imposing harmful, regressive gender stereotypes on all Americans. But for whatever reason, the data shows us that in 2020, conservatives seem to just remember all at once that transgender people exist. And they responded to this revelation by returning to their 2016 form and introducing a completely new swath of state-level anti-trans bills. While a total of just 6 anti-trans healthcare bills were introduced in the entire preceding 2 years, we can tell that 2020 was when that concept was first discovered en masse by Republican strategists. 2020 alone saw 24 of these kinds of bills introduced nationwide, which is a full 8-fold increase over the preceding 2 years average. But unlike the last time this happened, we can see that moving into 2021, the anti-trans bigots not only maintained their fury and position, but seemingly got the brick fully duct taped to the gas pedal by that point. While the entire period from 2018 to 2020 saw 111 total bills introduced across all American state legislatures, 2021 saw 144 bills of that same kind introduced. We also started to see more of that viciousness that we talked about previously. One example would be 2021's New Hampshire House Bill 198, which directly stated that civil rights shall not apply to transgender girls seeking to participate in gender-aligned sports. Another would be 2021's Arkansas House Bill 1570, the dubiously named Save Adolescents from Experimentation, or SAFE Act, A little more info about this bill from translegislation.com. Arkansas's Save Adolescents from Experimentation, or SAFE Act, HB 1570, has been called the single most extreme anti-trans law to ever pass through a state legislature by ACLU lawyer Chase Strangio, who argued before the Supreme Court in the landmark case Bostock v. Clayton County. The SAFE Act passed in April despite a veto by Republican Governor Asa Hutchinson, who in an op-ed called the bill a quote-unquote vast government overreach. The SAFE Act bans gender-affirming care to trans patients under the age of 18, including hormone blockers and a reversible measure to temporarily prevent the onset of puberty. The SAFE Act passed under the guise of protecting children, but LGBTQ advocates stress that denying treatments can have life or death consequences. Dr. Lee Beers, president of the American Academy of Pediatrics, warns that the law is dangerous and politicizes medical care. Oh, and quick note, while that bill was forced into law due to the aforementioned veto override, it has now been blocked in the courts by, you guessed it, the ACLU. However, that has not stopped the Arkansas State Senate from, in February of this year, advancing their own version of that bill in their chambers. I told you, this episode was going to suck. Reports also indicate that while these kinds of access bills were still the predominant method by which transphobes sought to advance their agenda, there was a shift taking place in exactly what they wanted to deny trans people access to. This from a 2021 Slate article by Mark Joseph Stern. Most of the bathroom bills never actually passed, although plenty of school districts implemented them at the local level, and North Carolina modified its notorious measure after statewide backlash. These laws were never especially popular, probably because there is no obvious victim when a transgender person uses the appropriate bathroom, and thus no apparent problem in need of a solution. They were rooted in the fear of the bathroom predator, a mythical figure who pretends to be female so he can gain access to women's bathrooms and rape them. But the bathroom predator does not exist.
Now, I wish someone had told me when I was in high school that I could have felt like a woman when it came time to take showers in PE. I'm pretty sure I would have found my feminine side and said, "Coach, I think I'd rather shower with the girls today."
So ADF developed a second generation of anti-transgender legislation, this time identifying an ostensible problem and a victim. The problem: transgender girls and women participating in sports, particularly school athletics. The victim: every cisgender girl and woman forced to compete against trans athletes. The solution: new model legislation drafted and pushed by the ADF banning transgender students from participating in women's sports from elementary school through college. Now for reference here, the ADF mentioned stands for the Alliance Defending Freedom, a conservative legal action group of extreme power and influence. The best I can describe the ADF is to say that it's kind of like the conservative foil and nemesis of the ACLU. Like the ACLU, the ADF focuses on legalistic activism, and that can take one of two forms: battling for conservative causes in the courts, or ghostwriting legislation for lazy conservative legislators. And while the ACLU avoids the latter to focus on the former, the ADF is really into the former. So, after literally writing the framework bills that would lead to the end of Roe v. Wade, the ADF simply moved their crosshairs a little bit to the left and started targeting trans folks. They have already written several of the currently active or passed bathroom and sports access bills, and are still defending transphobes in court on the regular. The ADF has so aggressively pivoted into this strategy that they're even willing to rub elbows with quote-unquote feminists, at least of the trans-exclusionary, radical, turfy variety. We can see this in documented financial support they've provided to organizations like the turf-based Women's Liberation Front, or WOLF. Here we can see WOLF's website, where they make a far better wolf in sheep's clothing joke about fake feminism than I could ever hope to. But I digress. And while the ADF tends to do its most active work behind the scenes, they do maintain an online media presence. While it does mostly just kind of give off a dollar store PragerU vibe, it does give us some insight into their ideology right now. It's here where we can see this pivot into exclusionary sports activism taking place in real time.
For starters, The Equality Act would mandate that men who identify as women be allowed to compete for spots on female sports teams, for women's scholarships, and for other academic and sports-related opportunities designed specifically for women. Female athletes like Selena Soule, Chelsea Mitchell, and Alana Smith know this firsthand. They've all become victims of local policies similar to the Equality Act that force them to compete against biological males in competitive track meets.
Oh, and actually, let's go ahead and discuss this little case they're talking about here. See, this multi-million-dollar lobbying organization could somehow only manage to find 4 cisgendered girls across all Connecticut high schools who had a problem running against transgender athletes. And that comes from a state that's reported to have 247 teams registered for high school track events. Not 247 participants, mind you, 247 teams. And yes, I sat there and counted all of those by myself, including the incredibly named Stonington. Which reminds me, James, make a note to self. Tell Jen about a cool vacation idea you just came up with. Moving back to 2021, though, news at the time shows us that folks were just starting to realize this massive wave of transphobia and transphobic legislation was starting to move towards them at breakneck speed. In a tragic irony, I found some articles lamenting 2021 as the quote-unquote worst year for transgender folks in U.S. history, which was true at the time, but also showed how little they knew of what was to come. And these folks certainly wouldn't have to wait long to see just how bad things were going to get either. 2022, as we can see here, served only to build upon the transphobic wave that came to us from 2021. They found room to shove more conservative anti-trans legislation down all of our throats, with 2022 seeing a disturbing 177 state-level anti-trans bills introduced, as opposed to 2021's 144. Furthermore, while access and healthcare bills seem to maintain growth in step with the otherwise incremental growth of this transphobic movement at large, the quote-unquote miscellaneous category instead absolutely exploded in 2022. While there are certainly a wide variety of different and sadistically creative bills in this category, this rapid rise seems to come from a new transphobic cause du jour: drag performers and drag performances. You all heard that right, folks. All the greatest conservative minds in the United States got together in 2022, and they decided that this is the greatest threat to American children today.
And I'm the only surefire way to disengage your temporomandibular joint, Dr. Bitchcraft. I don't know what. Let's party.
And at last we have come to this, the year of our Dark Lord 2023. Now, I don't think one needs a data science degree to look at this chart and tell that one of the lines sticks out a bit more than the others, but seeing as I do have a degree in data science that I paid $30,000 for, please allow me to try and explain this in layman's terms, if you will. Truly, though, it is hard to describe exactly how insanely awful this line of data is. An unprecedented number of state-level anti-trans bills, an unholy 498 of them, have been introduced in just the first third of 2023 alone. This is more than the entire last 2 years combined, which I feel the need to remind everyone were both individually disastrous in their own rights. And at the same time, though, I think that a line of data like this can be so overwhelming that we actually forget to sit down and parse it out. And that can lead to some important insights going unnoticed. For example, we can see that the access bills do seem to have plateaued in popularity in comparison to the other kinds of bills. And something like that could be useful information if our goal is to slow down and stop this movement entirely.
We should never place the preference of an adult over the safety and innocence of a child.
See, I agree so much, Michelle. The preferences of adults shouldn't be imposed on innocent transgender children simply trying to use the bathroom or participate in sports with their friends. For speaking out so boldly, I truly do thank you, Michelle. But with this tiny sliver of hope comes an avalanche of new problems introduced in this same 2023 legislative blitz. Building upon the DeSantis-led Don't Say Gay bill from Florida, conservative strategists now seem much more interested in taking an active role to legislate the existence of trans students, and truly all of LGBTQIA+ history, in the American classroom. In this graphic from the Movement Advancement Project, we can see just how effective they've been so far at this too, with a total of 13 states having already put homophobic and transphobic classroom laws into effect, as opposed to just 7 states who have put formal protections of that same kind in place. And please note that all of the remaining states on this map are, at least at the time of recording, up for grabs. States like Arizona have also particularly gone mad for these kinds of bills, as we can hear in this excerpt from translegislation.com. Schools are frequently the site of anti-trans bills, often invoking quote-unquote parental rights. Last year, the Don't Say Gay or Trans bills, like Florida House Bill 1557, made headlines for limiting the expression of LGBTQ+ teachers and students. In 2023, this continues with bills like Arizona House Bill 1700, encouraging parents to report and ban books which promote gender fluidity or gender pronouns, or Arizona Senate Bill 1001, which requires that both a guardian and teacher approve of a student's pronouns. Contributing as well to this massive wave of miscellaneous transphobic legislation has also been an increased focus on the aforementioned drag bans popularized in 2022. A full 32 bills of this type have been introduced in 17 state legislatures across the country since just January of 2023. And as if that weren't bad enough all on its own, which it certainly is, these bills are being written by people who have much less than a basic understanding of drag performance. As such, they tend to go pretty akimbo oftentimes, using the vaguest language possible, ensuring that any performance in which the performer's birth gender isn't fully represented by them on stage could leave them exposed to fines, lawsuits, arrest, or worse. With bright yellow hair and a black blazer splashed with color, transgender artist and performer Keyring leaned into the microphone on the floor of the Texas Senate chamber on March 23rd to address members of the State Affairs Committee during the hearing about Senate Bill 12. The language of this bill is incredibly vague when it comes to defining what exactly a drag performer is and most likely to be utilized to accuse potentially any Texan of a sexually oriented performance, she told the committee members. SB 12 would criminalize performances by people exhibiting as the opposite sex assigned at birth in front of a minor or in a public space if it appeals to the prurient interest of sex. Violators would face a Class A misdemeanor carrying a penalty of up to a year in jail, a $4,000 fine, or both. The bill would also let the state fine businesses $10,000 if they allow minors to attend so-called prurient drag performances. Keyring made the 3-hour drive down from Dallas to testify at the committee hearing because, she told Truth Out, the bill presents a direct attack on her livelihood, as its passage could make it a crime to merely perform in public as a transgender person in Texas. She said she already experiences harassment during performances in North Texas. Truly, this bill is an attack on First Amendment rights that are protected by the Constitution and of LGBTQIA+ people to express themselves in the way they see fit, she told Truth Out outside the Senate chamber prior to the hearing. I must say it is actually the good and royal queens out there like Keyring who are giving me the most hope in this situation. Which, by the way, Keyring is maybe the hardest individual drag name I've ever found to Google. Keyring, if you see this, just please take my thanks for a good fight well fought. I do like to believe that this anti-drag wave was a massive miscalculation on the part of conservative strategists. I think drag queens are just about some of the only people left on Earth who might be able to actually change minds on this issue.
Recently, a wave of drag superstars like Ben de la Creme and the incomparable Broadway star Jinx Monsoon went on various cable news channels to shine a light on these inhumane bills.
There is so much fear around how people are going to continue to live their full authentic life. I know people who are starting to figure out how they're going to hoard hormones in case, in their state, suddenly they don't have access to the things that they need. And not only does it put their health in danger, it also fuels this fire of violence, this perception that trans people are less than, that trans people are somehow trying to disrupt society, trying to do something to your children or your way of life, rather than trying to go around their own business.
But don't you feel like society is demanding, right? I hear that.
Yeah,
I don't understand. I watch a drag performer. Who do they date? Who do they marry? Who cares?
Well, but that's the thing, is we have been conditioned to believe that there is a right and a wrong way to do things, and there's a natural and an unnatural way to do things, when we should be being told that whatever works for you is natural and normal and right.
And all that's not even to account for the big mainstream names backing the drag cause as well. When you've got people like Shania and Taylor on your side, when you've got Lizzo actively flaunting these states' terrible transphobic laws on her stages, well, that's a sign things are going in the right direction, at least in some regards. But all of that leads me to my last and most terrifying point about the 2023 data that we have: the terrifying rise of gender-affirming healthcare bans all across this country. From 37 bills nationwide in all of 2022 to a staggering 169 in just the first third of 2023. That is the kind of rise that makes data scientists stand up, take notice, and pray to whatever god they believe in. Gender-affirming healthcare bans, it seems at least in part, look to gain acceptance from broader American culture by quote-unquote only targeting the trans community directly, at its most isolated and vulnerable, in order to cull any passive interest in the situation. It seems like their goal is clear. Go after the smallest subgroup of people that you can, target them for abject social extinction, and then hope you can follow through on your plan before the rest of society even notices what happened. We can see this playing out before our very eyes. This new crop of bills aims for a much higher degree of trans eradication. Once again, we hear from translegislation.com. In 2023, we see a continuation of trends from the past few years: blocking trans kids and teachers from being visible in schools, denying state recognition through birth certificates, and banning widely accepted gender-affirming healthcare. However, many 2023 bills go even further. Oklahoma Senate Bill 129 proposed extending gender-affirming care bans well into adulthood, up to 26 years old. For physicians, this would mean that providing the care supported by every major medical association would result in felony charges and a loss of medical license. Similarly, Wyoming SF0111 would make gender-affirming healthcare child abuse. And if that doesn't convince you, let's just go ahead and listen to the words coming straight out of Donald Trump's stupid orange face in January of this year, and realize that if he's saying it, then that means the rest of the party is more than ready to fall in line.
The left-wing gender insanity being pushed on our children is an act of child abuse. Very simple. Here's my plan to stop the chemical, physical, and emotional mutilation of our youth. On day one, I will revoke Joe Biden's cruel policies on so-called gender-affirming care. Ridiculous. A process that includes giving kids puberty blockers, mutating their physical appearance, and ultimately performing surgery on minor children. Can you believe this?
We can see another pivot in conservative strategy on this situation as well. Instead of targeting trans folks for the extremely disprovable concepts of bathroom victimization or sports cheating, we now see instead a new, but no less fully falsified, focus on misguided youth being quote-unquote tricked into transgenderism. We can see this in full effect at this year's 2023 conference for CPAC, a front-facing and well-known conservative action group that, unlike the ADF, absolutely loves being the center of attention. These conferences of theirs, by the way, are an absolutely fantastic place to take the pulse of conservative America at any given year, and just so you all know, most of the CPAC conferences are uploaded in full to the C-SPAN archive for free, so... That is, for example, how I found this panel on transgenderism, as they call it at CPAC, this does give us some insight into just exactly how conservatives are looking at this issue right now. Let's listen here to Chloe Cole, who underwent both gender transition and detransition before her 18th birthday, specifically as she highlights the discrepancy between the healthcare she received during her transition and the healthcare she received during her detransition.
Chloe, I'm wondering, how was this covered by your insurance program, or did they have to pay out of pocket?
Yeah, so I'm from California, and by law, insurance companies are supposed to cover every single step of the transition process, pretty much.
And I'm curious, so they're forced to, by law, cover the transitions, but what about in your case, when you end up figuring out that you didn't need these surgeries and they took advantage? Are they forced to cover the detransition surgeries and treatments?
No, so I've reached out to the team of medical professionals who helped me to transition, and I haven't gotten any help with my detransition. I've pretty much had to figure out how to go through motions all by myself. There's still a lot of unknowns. I mean, I'm having a lot of complications from the blockers, the cross-sex hormones, and the surgery, and I haven't gotten help with any of those. There's no standards of care for people like me.
That is so evil. The obvious thing is this is so evil. They lock them into this, and then they don't help them get out of it once they realize they're taken advantage of.
Now, to most of us here, I suspect that Chloe's story is much less about liberal bias than it is about how no part of American healthcare should be privatized or profit-based in any way. But, fun fact, if you try to bring up universal healthcare at a CPAC conference, they'll just hit you with the flamethrower and go on about their day. So instead, this packed house of conservative lawmakers and activists is being told that this young woman was taken advantage of by transgender activists and progressive doctors, rather than what really happened, which is that she was denied important medical care for complex medical concerns. And it is from this kind of narrow and manipulated information that their genocidal bills are being built, disseminated, and inflicted upon all trans Americans. In my opinion, having spent several days now deep in the tank on this issue, the battle for gender-affirming healthcare is the part of this that right now needs all of our attention and advocacy the most. Any greater social complacency on this issue than we are already seeing could have fatal consequences for thousands upon thousands of trans folks. Think about it. In 2021, we said that there were 144 state-level anti-trans bills introduced into legislatures across the country. Well, 18 of those bills, or around 8%, passed and became law. In 2022, of the 174 bills that were introduced, 26 of them, or about 15%, were passed into law. And with the numbers we have for 2023 and the rate of expansion that we're seeing of these bills being passed, we could expect anywhere from 75 to 100 anti-trans pieces of legislation getting passed into law all across this country. Think about all the things that could go wrong if we don't stand up and say not one more goddamn inch to these transphobes and their terrible bills. And truly, as I approach the end of this video, I want to say that that's what this is about, a call to action. The data surrounding the current US wave of transphobia has made it clear. Things are really bad. We have every reason to suspect that they could get worse, and in order to stop that, we need to do something fast. But I also know that political action is difficult and brutal and sometimes impossible depending on where you're at in your life and what things are going on that require your attention. Many of you watching this right now have friends and loved ones whose health care could be drastically affected by any one of these bills, if not your own health care. You're scared, you're burnt out, you're tired, and that's okay. Even in that situation, there are some small practical things you can still do to help, and I'd like to try and outline a couple of those. The first thing is to stay educated, which is great because that's what you've been doing for however long this video has been going by now. I don't know, I wrote the script ahead of time. But long-winded video essays by smarmy hirsute white men aren't the only way to stay educated either. And in fact, people of color and disabled folks have been spreading these messages far longer than people like me have. So please make sure to keep their work included in your education process as well. I can't encourage you enough to check out the ACLU's interactive map of nationwide trans legislation, and honestly to just check out the entirety of translegislation.com. These are wonderful resources, and checking them today would go a long way to helping get you all the information you need to stay ahead of your state's anti-trans movement. It'll provide you with a snapshot of where your state is right at any given moment, and it will give you a bit of a snapshot of the nation at large, too. And remember, this issue is primarily being fought at the local and state levels, but it also means that some states and some people are at much greater risk than others right now. Based on just the information from the ACLU, for example, the top 3 states in this nation advancing the most anti-trans legislation are Texas, Oklahoma, and my own home state of Missouri. And while it certainly doesn't feel good to know I live in one of those top 3 states, it does feel very empowering for me to know where we stand and how bad things have gotten. Staying informed can be as simple as typing in your state trans law into Google and sorting by new. It can also mean taking a look and being aware of the organizations behind this action as well. We've talked about some of them today, like the ADF and CPAC, but there are more: the Council for National Policy, the Family Research Council, tons of others that if I tried to list would make this video about 10 hours longer. But all of these organizations have played major behind-the-scenes parts in advancing this wave of transphobic legislation, and I think it's useful to not let them hide in the dark anymore. And bear in mind that not everything that's happening is just bills being advanced through a legislature. Take my own state of Missouri, for example. I use the resources at translegislation.com and the ACLU to find out about the bills advancing through my state, sure. But meanwhile, Missouri's awful Attorney General Andrew Bailey has been pushing an emergency order that completely and unilaterally bypasses any other legislative process in our state to try and shut down transgender health care anywhere in Missouri. And he's also actively trying to set up his own trans bounty website as well. And these are things I could not have learned just looking into the bills. There's other action at play here. We live in a time now that is calling for action and engagement, not complacency and a reliance on good fortune. Conservative lawmakers across this nation have made it clear that their goal is to eradicate transgender people from American public life, and that they are more than willing to follow through on those goals with legislation to back it up. We must meet their action with an equal or greater opposite reaction. And I think this is the part where most people get intimidated and feel overwhelmed and bow out. I want you all to know that I understand that feeling. I've been fighting it myself for the past several months. I really have. But I am also here to tell you that there are a ton of ways that you can get involved and help out. And some of them might not even cost you all of your spoons for the day. Participate in discussions of trans rights online. And if you get the chance, clog up that Missouri Trans Bounty website with the B-movie script. And if you got that dog in you and want to take this fight to the streets, well, there's ways to do that too. Keep an eye out for protests in your area. Try to make time to go to one whenever you can, and if you've got a car and know folks that couldn't get there otherwise, offer some rides. Lord knows I've had to do that plenty of times, and it always makes the day better. I've included an article about safe protest practices from NYU's Center for Race, Inequality, and the Law. It's an excellent resource for this kind of thing. Last, I guess, if you're a really civic-minded person, then I would highly encourage you to check out this organization, Indivisible, and their practical guide for defeating MAGA, which is free on their website and also linked in the description. This organization is awesome. It was founded and run by former congressional staffers who sought to give people a very practical guide for how to quite frankly, bully their legislators into doing their job and representing their constituents as God intended. And more broadly, just keeping engaged with your local political scene is a great way to prevent things like this from happening in the future. If nothing else, I think one of the core lessons of this whole situation is just how much local and state level policies can affect the day-to-day lives of residents in that area than federal ones could ever hope to. And more directly, you can also research organizations of mutual aid in your community that seek to provide resources and support directly to marginalized and oppressed populations and individuals. Keeping those kinds of people in your community and keeping them fed, housed, clothed, and cared for is a revolutionary act in times like these we're living in. No matter what, be mindful of your own limits and need for rest. And that's before you take up this or any other cause. I can tell you, even without knowing you, that you are most effective when you're motivated, rested, and clear of mind. All of those things have to be cultivated and preserved. That can be things as simple as drinking water, making sure to take your meds every day, or even clearing time for your hobbies and your loved ones every day. And I also personally think that this means, as individuals in a movement, that we need to be aware of our own existence in time and space and how we relate to said movement. As a white man in his mid-30s who appears cisgendered and heterosexual to most people that look at him, I know my life is not on the line the same way that it is for my trans and non-binary friends when it comes to these issues. People just don't target me in this country the way that they target a lot of other folks. And so in situations like this, I consider it an honor to be able to stand up for the trans community, even if I'm not a member of that community necessarily. And just before I go, I especially want to speak to any of the trans or non-binary youth that might be watching this right now in 2023. I want you all to know that queer life is not the scary, terrible thing that a lot of people want to convince you that it is. Reminding yourself that you're loved, that there are people fighting for you, and that society can also change for the better, that's worth taking time for and can help keep you sane in such a difficult period. There are a lot of adults out there, some of them who even have real power and influence, who are tirelessly fighting for you and your rights.
The moment we allowed my daughter to be who she is, to grow her hair, to wear the clothes she wanted to wear, she was a different child. And I mean, it was immediate. It was a total transformation. I now have a confident, a smiling, a happy daughter. She plays on a girls' volleyball team. She has friendships. She's a kid. I came here today as a parent to share my story. I need you to understand that this language, if it becomes law, will have real effects on real people. It will affect my daughter. It will mean she cannot play on the girls' volleyball team or dance squad or tennis team. I ask you, please don't take that away from my daughter or the countless others like her who are out there. Let them have their childhoods. Let them be who they are. I ask you to vote against this legislation.
Don't tell me it's about irreparable harm, because you're not doing anything for the children that are hungry. You're not doing anything for the children that are in foster care being abused. You're not doing what needs to be done for the little black kids that are experiencing racism every day. It is not for irreparable harm. It's because they are not like you. And as a mother, how dare you interfere with one of the most intimate relationships? This bill doesn't even do anything to say, well, I think the parenting is inadequate, so let me put some money and some time into parenting skills. This bill doesn't even say, what is the problem with parenting skills? It goes for the juggler to kill, annihilate, and make sure that a whole group of people, who by the way is a small percentage, have no rights.
If this legislature collectively decides that legislating hate against children is our priority, then I am going to make it painful for everyone. Because if you want to inflict pain upon our children, I am going to inflict pain upon this body. And I have nothing nothing but time. And I am going to use all of it. If people think that they're going to wear me down, if yesterday didn't show you that you can't wear me down, you cannot wear me down.
There are so many of us out here who know that this is wrong, and we are standing up to be by your side in this time and trying to recruit others to this cause. And I just hope you know that. I just hope you know how much we love you here at Fundy Fridays. We love you here. We wanted to make this video in part to, as best we could, show our commitment to the preservation and advancement of your community. We've got your back for as long as it takes. I hope that today, in addition to giving you a little bit of useful knowledge about this situation that's going on, that I have shown you as well how many people are willing to fight for you. You do not deserve what's happening to you right now. And there are a lot of good people standing by your side to help make this right as best they can. We love you all. Trans rights are human rights, now and forever. Good night, everyone. Okay, this is going to be a short outro. That was the heaviest episode I've done by far. One more time, I'm just going to say it. Trans rights are human rights, and that will never change. Here at Fundy Fridays, we support that fully and forever, and we want everybody to know that. I'm not going to talk about ways you can support our channel today. That just doesn't feel right. You know, look for what I talked about in the video, ways to support your community and the vulnerable folks in it right now. We do love you all. We'll be coming back in the next few weeks with some stuff that's a little more of our standard stuff, a little more entertainment and fundies and all that good stuff. So keep an eye out for that, at least on the channel. We're going to be getting back to a bit more normalcy after this, even if the country doesn't keep up. I just want to tell all the trans and non-binary folks again that Fundy Fridays has nothing but love for you, and you'll always be safe on this channel, at least. You'll always be represented and cared and counted for. So thank you all so much for everything. Go out there and fight the good fight.